All right.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 49th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Mori Federation Webinars, then Webinar Series in Progress, as shown here. All episodes of this and the Secret Teaching Series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald, Secret Teachings, or Secret Doctrine. Okay, this month, Colonel Olcott chronicles the disappearance of Damodar K. Mavalankar, whose guru was the Master K.H. So could we get a reader for this?
Yeah, I'll start it out. Okay. The mysterious disappearance of Damodar. Damodar had disappeared and left no trace behind him as a clue to show me whether he had gone or when he would return, if ever. I hastily went through the 4 communicating rooms, but they were empty. My other companions have gone to the river for a bath. From Damodar's window, I called to a servant and learned from him that Damodar had left the bungalow alone at daybreak, but left no message. Not knowing exactly what to make of it, I returned to my room and found lying on the table a note from a master, bidding me not to worry about the lad as he was under his protection, but giving me no hint as to his return. It had taken but a minute or so to make the circuit of the 4 intercommunicating open-doored rooms, and I had heard no messenger's footstep in the gravelly compound. A person could hardly have entered my room between my leaving and re-entering it. Yet here was the mysterious letter in the K.H. writing and familiar Chinese envelope lying on my table.
Okay, next.
Lynn, can you read that, please?
My first instinct was to take Damodar's luggage, his trunk and bedding, and pack it away under my own cot. I then dispatched a telegram to HPB telling her of his disappearance and of my having no idea as to his return. When the bathers got back from the river, they were naturally as excited as myself over the incident, and we wasted much time in speculations and surmises as to its possible sequel. I went twice to the palace that day and found myself increasingly welcome to His Highness. He showed me every courtesy, discussed the Vedanta philosophy with evidently deep interest, and gave me a pressing invitation to accompany him the next time he should go to his Kashmirian capital, Srinagar. Just as evening was closing in and I was sitting alone, writing in our bungalow, the others having gone for a ride on horseback, I heard a step on the gravel outside and looked around, saw a tall Kashmiri costume telegraph peon, messenger, bring me a message. On opening, I found it to be from HPB in answer to mine. She said that a master had told her that Damodar would return and that I must not let his luggage, especially his bedding, be touched by any third party. That was strange, was it not, that she at Madras, some 2,000 miles away, should tell me to do the very thing it had been my first impulse to do on finding the lad's departure. Was it long-distance telepathy or what? There was something stranger yet to come.
Okay. Third reader.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
To open and read the dispatch had not taken me a minute. The peon had not had more than time enough to get across the veranda into the compound when, like a flash, it came to me that the form of the peon was not real but a Maya, and that he belonged to the Brotherhood. I knew it. I could swear to it. because of a certain psychic disturbance caused in me by the approach of one of those personages. In fact, I could presently identify the peculiar vibration set up by the mesmeric current of my own teacher, who was also HPB's teacher. I ran to the door and looked across the bare compound, in which were no trees or bushes to serve as hiding places, but nothing was in sight. The peon had disappeared as if into the ground. I've been asked, when telling this story, how the transfer of the dispatch from the keeping of the real peon to the simulated one, and the return of my signed receipt to the telegraph office, could be accounted for unless the messenger had been a consenting party. The thing is very simple, provided the reality of hypnotic power be conceded. The adept meets the peon, by willpower prevents his seeing him, causes him to become unconscious, leads him to any convenient place of hiding, leaves him there asleep, puts the elusive appearance of the man over his own features and person, brings me the telegram, takes my receipt, salutes, and retires. The next moment, the nervous thrill caused in me by his sympathetic magnetism reacted in himself, warns him that I am on the alert and will naturally come to the door. So he inhibits my sight to prevent my seeing him, returns to the sleeping peon, puts the receipt in his hand, wills that he shall recollect as if it had happened to himself. The brief episode of our meeting awakens him, inhibits his sight, and sends him back to the telegraph office. A very simple sequence of events, easily comprehensible for every advanced mesmerist.
Yeah, out of all those advanced mesmerists around. Okay, thanks, Carrie. Actually, we're not quite done. I thought that was it, but I put the assignation on the wrong page. So we have one more reading.
Greg?
It was on 25th November at daylight that Damodar left us. He returned in the evening of the 27th after an absence of some 60 hours. But how changed? He left a delicate framed, pale student-like young man, frail, timid, deferential. He returned with his olive face bronzed, several shades darker, seemingly robust, tough, and wiry, bold and energetic in manner. We could scarcely realize that he was the same person. He had been at the Master's Retreat ashram, undergoing certain training. He brought me a message from another master, well known to me, and to prove its genuineness, whispered in my ear a certain agreed password by which lodge messages were authenticated to me, and which is still valid, a fact which certain transatlantic persons might profitably take note of.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this month we'll continue with the subject of karma as we take up the last paragraph of commentary on verse 5. Could we get a reader including... We were in the middle of this paragraph last time, so we're going to reread it now. Could we get a reader to including the footnote, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
The Lapika, a description of excuse me. The Lapika, a description of whom is given in the commentary on stanza 4, number 6, are the second. Are the spirits of the universe, whereas the builders are only our own planetary deities. The former belong to the most occult portion of cosmogenesis, which cannot be given here. Whether the adepts, even the highest, know this angelic order in the completeness of its triple degrees, or only the lower one connected with the records of our world, is something which the writer is unprepared to say, and she would incline rather to the latter supposition. Of its highest grade, one thing only is taught. Lapika are connected with karma, being its direct recorders. The symbol for sacred and secret knowledge was universally in antiquity a tree, by which a scripture or a record was also meant. Hence the word Lapika, the writers or scribes, the dragons, symbols of wisdom who guard the trees of knowledge, the golden apple, tree of the Hesperides, the luxuriant trees and vegetation of Mount Meru, guarded by a serpent. Juno giving to Jupiter on her marriage with him a tree with golden fruit is another form of Eve offering Adam the apple from the tree of knowledge.
Thank you, Scott. Any thoughts or questions about this passage? Okay, first, as to whether any adept knows the angelic order or order of Lapikas in the completeness of its triple degrees remains, of course, an open question. But I think HPB would have been astonished at what has become available on this subject through a treatise on cosmic fire less than 30 years after the publication of the Secret Doctrine. As an example, let's take a look at an excerpt that reveals details of the hierarchical order of the Lapikas, details unavailable in HPB's time. Can we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? Hold on a second. Let me get down to your name. There you go.
Okay. The Lapika lords, controlling the periodical manifestation of life, are, roughly speaking, divided into the following groups, which might be of interest to note. 1, 3 extra systemic or cosmic lords of karma, who work from a center in Sirius through the medium of 3 representatives. These form a group around the solar logos and hold to him a position analogous to the 3 Buddhas of activity who stand around Sanat Kumara. 2, 3 Lapika lords, who are the karmic agents working through the 3 aspects. 3, 9 Lapikas, who are the sum total of the agents for the law, working through what the Kabbalah calls the 9 Sephiroth. 4, 7 presiding agents of karma for each one of the 7 schemes. These 4 groups correspond in manifestation to the unmanifested, manifesting through the triple aspects, and under them work an infinity of lesser agents. These lesser agents might again be somewhat differentiated, each of the following groups being found in every scheme and on every ray emanation. 1, the Lapika lords of a scheme who, through the manipulation of forces, make it possible for a planetary logos to incarnate under the law and work out his cyclic problem. 2, those who, under the first group, control the destiny of a chain. 3, those who are the energy directors of a globe. Agents of every kind who are concerned with the karmic adjustments incident upon the periodical manifestation of such forms as a round, 7 in all. B, a kingdom in nature, 7 in all. C, a human kingdom. A root race, subrace, and branch race. E, a nation, a family, a group, and their correspondences in all the kingdoms. F, a plane. G, the reptile and insect world. H, evolution. I, the devas. J, human units, egoic groups, monadic lives, and myriads of other forms, objective and subjective, planetary and interplanetary, in connection with the sun and in connection with the planetoids. All work with energy emanations and with the force units under cyclic law, and all have the same objective, producing of perfected activity, intensification of heat, and of radiant magnetic light as an expression of the will or purpose of each embodied life.
Thank you. Well read. Any thoughts or questions about this? All these groups are seamlessly linked with and within one another. So, what's the difference between a Lapika and a builder? Seems like a different job description, but since karma determines all aspects of form building, there's actually a deep interaction between these two groups. Karma is much more than reward and payback. These great lords direct and regulate the quality and nature of the substance that makes up all form life within the solar system based on planetary, racial, national, and group karma, as well as on previous lives and the degree of consciousness gained by the jivas that inhabit these forms. In this statement, HPB suggests that the scope and thus the consciousness of the Lapika is greater than that of the builders, which is true within a given system. But there are builders that work with the formation of planetary chains, solar system, constellations, etc., who must be of greater consciousness than the Lapikas that govern the karma of our own planet. Let's take a look at the footnote. And we're going to go a little mini tutorial here on the sacred tree, the idea of the this tree of knowledge and the tree of life. So, first, the symbol for sacred and secret knowledge was universally in antiquity a tree, by which a scripture or a record was also meant. A tree, as you know, is an organizational tool used to lay out any hierarchical system of knowledge. A sacred tree, while having these organizational aspects, is also a conduit of spiritual potency and a source of nurture. Black Elk famously said, "The sacred hoop of any nation is but one of many that together make the great circle of creation. In the center grows a mighty flowering tree of life, sheltering all the children of one mother and one father. All life is holy." Whole books have been written on the symbolism of the sacred trees, such as Roger Cook's The Tree of Life, whose chapters include the tree of imagination, the tree at the center, the tree of fertility, of ascent, of sacrifice, of knowledge, of history, and of inner necessity, all these being aspects of the tree of life. Joseph Campbell makes the observation that the tree of knowledge and the tree of life are only separate in Western culture, whereas in the East, the tree of knowledge is an aspect of the tree of life. This difference has had a profound effect on the perspective of East and West on spirituality, especially as it relates to the natural world. The tree of knowledge can be found in esoteric teachings of most of the ancient cultures. For example, in ancient Hindu mythology, it is called Parihata, the tree of paradise, delight of heavenly maidens, with its fragrant blossoms perfuming the whole world. So in this illustration, we have on the right, we have Krishna uproots the tree from heaven as Indra and his wife Indrani look on. You can see him there, here uprooting the tree, right? And then up at the top here, Krishna, Satyambhama, and Garuda steal Indra's Parihata tree. All metaphors for the descent and ascent of the sacred. In the mythology of the Maori, the tree of knowledge has 10 branches and is overseen by Tahane Mahuta, Maori for Lord of the Forest. Gerald Massey tells us that, quote, the Assyrian Asheroth tree or grove is based on a central pillar which depicts the 7 heads of a naga. This identifies the tree with the 7-headed dragon of the celestial pole. Probably the most well-known example of a sacred tree is the Tree of Life, made up of 10 Sephiroth, the root symbol of Kabbalism, whose interconnecting paths lead to progressively higher levels of consciousness. In Theosophy, the tree is linked to the teachings on the Sutratma and the Antakarana. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry. Anne Veronica, she says, does Lapika mean the writers? Do they keep the Akashic records?
Yes, in both counts. Right. And of course, it's much more than just recorders. When you say writers, they impress etheric substance, a higher etheric substance, with the progression of the universal unfoldment, you could say. And that's been translated to meaning, a scripture or record, right? But the Akashic records are more than just exist in more than just written form.
Okay, and then Greg says, and there is also the Kabbalah, which essentially means from an abstract or esoteric point of view, the tree of knowledge. The Ankh is another example of the tree through the pagan beliefs.
Yes, yeah, it's true. Yeah, you have the fundamentals in that symbol of the Ankh, of a tree with the vertical trunk, and then the horizontal branching, and then the flowering circle at the top. Okay, next, the dragons, symbols of wisdom who guard the trees of knowledge. Let's take a look at Gerald Massey's thought on the link between serpents or dragons and the tree of knowledge. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Vivian, can you read that for us, please? Let me unmute you. There, you should be able to talk now.
Okay. The tree which the earliest people leaned against for mental support and hung their signs of beseeching and tokens of gratitude upon, and garlanded with the flowers of spring and fruits of harvest, or set alight with candles in imitation of the starry fires, was the tree of heaven, and it was the tree of heaven figuratively, because of the celestial pole at the fixed center, on which their eyes first rested, to be followed by their thoughts. And by that tree, as up the mount of the north, they first ascended heavenward. The dragon revolving around the pole supplied the natural genesis of the serpent coiling and twining round the tree. The serpent and tree are twin and inseparable. The serpent in the fruit tree is common in the Greek drawings. It has been found in Indian caves and Abyssinian temples. The serpent twined around a tree with fruit-bearing boughs is sometimes painted on Egyptian sarcophagi. So on the coins of Tyre, we see the serpent coiled about the tree that is in fruit. The first divinity in the Dahoman pantheon, an African system, is the serpent in its 2 characters. The next is the tree represented by the bombax or cotton tree. Bruce describes the Shangalas as worshippers of the serpent, the tree, the moon, planets, and stars. Here the tree and serpent are identified with the stars. We shall find no simpler form of the beginnings that dawned out of the darkness. The water was the firmament at first. In this blue water above, the tree of life was figured at the point of commencement, and round the tree the starry serpent or dragon twined with its 7 heads.
Thank you. Very well read. Okay. Next up, we have the golden apples tree of the Hesperides, which is the tree of life and figures in Hercules' third labor. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Labor 3, gathering the golden apples of the Hesperides, Gemini, May 21st of June 20th, till June the 20th. Upon all ways the search went on, and north and south and east and west the sacred tree was sought, but was not found. There came a day when, worn with fear and traveling, Hercules heard a rumor from a passing pilgrim on the way that near a distant mountain the tree was to be found, the first true statement giving him as yet. Therefore he turned his feet to the high mountains of the east, and on a bright and sunny day he saw the object of his search and hastened then his steps. Now I shall touch the sacred tree, he shouted in his joy. Surmount the guiding dragon, see the fair maidens of white fame, and pluck the apples. But again he was arrested by a sense of deep distress. Atlas confronted him, staggering 'neath the load of worlds upon his back. His face was lined with suffering. His limbs were bowed with pain. His eyes were closed with agony. He asked no help. He saw no Hercules, but stood bowed down with pain, with the weight of worlds. Hercules, trembling, watched and gauged the measure of the load and pain. He forgot about his search.
Okay, new reader, please. Thank you.
The sacred tree and apples faded from his mind. He only sought to aid the giant, and that without delay. Forward he rushed and eagerly removed the load, lifting it off the shoulders of his brother onto his own back, shouldering the burden of the worlds himself. He closed his eyes, bracing himself with effort, and lo, the load rolled off, and he stood free, and likewise Atlas. Before him stood the giant, and in his hand he held the golden apples, offering them with love to Hercules. The search was o'er. The sisters three held still more golden apples and pressed them likewise into his hands. And Aegle, that fair maid who is the glory of the setting sun, said unto him, placing an apple in his hand, the way to us is always marked by service. Deeds of love are signposts on the way. Then Erythrea, who keeps the gate which all must pass before they stand alone before the great presiding one, gave him an apple, and upon its side, inscribed in light, was written the golden word of service. Remember this, she said. Forget it not. And lastly, Hesperus came, the wonder of the evening star, and said to him with clarity and love, go forth and serve and tread the way. From henceforth and for aye, of all world servers. Then I give back these apples for those who follow on, said Hercules, and returned from whence he came.
Thank you, BL. Next, HPB equates Juno's gift to Jupiter of a tree with golden fruit to Eve's offering the apple from the tree of knowledge to Adam. Now, eating this metaphorical forbidden fruit led humanity into the realm of monastic development and thus into the subject-object duality that characterizes the three planes of human endeavor. This descent has temporarily cut humanity off from conscious awareness of Eden, the metaphorical source and origin of our being. What is not taught in exoteric Christianity is that this involutionary path is a necessary part of human unfoldment, leading to mental polarity and an integrated personality. Finally, according to a later quote in the Secret Doctrine, the tree is cut down by the sword of secret wisdom. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, but first, Efrosini has a question. She says, why does, well, she says EPB, but I think she means HPB, and maybe it's EPB in Greek. Anyway, why does she connect registering karma with sacred knowledge? Does the sacred knowledge help us overcome the karma?
Well, the answer to the last question is yes. Becoming aware through the secret teachings of how the system of karma works is part of that knowledge, which eventually allows us to overcome the karma, though it isn't in itself karma dissolving, right? But it allows us to see in perspective the nature of the karma that we must dissolve, right? So eventually, a lot of the sacred path has to do with detachment from the karmic burden, you could say. This is, I think, hinted at with the Hercules relieving Atlas of his burden, and there was a showing of Atlas of something having to do with his own karma that allowed him also to be released from whatever karma he was enduring in that. But there's a real secret in that transmission there. It's not really described. Yeah, anyone else?
And then Yvonne says, doesn't service help to cancel karma?
Yeah, as long as you don't do it in order to cancel karma. In other words, the motive always has to be selfless, right? Self-forgetful. Decentralization is the key to true service. It's not like, he knows what you're thinking, so don't think about the fact that it's canceling service. It's really, where's your polarity, and if you're decentralized, it's naturally going to be karma canceling. Eventually, ironically, you have to also free yourself from all good karma, which is another one of those great mysteries. How do you free yourself from good karma? Well, that has to do with being other than from or of the world of cause and effect, right? Which happens at one of the higher initiations.
Okay, Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Accurately understanding the great tree of which the unperceived, that is the occult nature, the root of all, is the sprout from the seed, Para Brahman, which consists of the understanding, Mahat, or the universal intelligent soul, as its trunk. The branches of which are the great egoism, in the holes of which are the sprouts, namely the senses, of which the great, that is the occult or invisible elements, are the flower bunches, the gross elements, the gross matter, the smaller boughs, which are always possessed of leaves, always possessed of flowers, which is eternal, and the seed of which is the Brahman, the deity, and cutting it with the excellent sword, knowledge, secret wisdom. One attains immortality and casts off birth and death. This is the tree of life, the Ashvatha tree. Only after the cutting of which the slave of life and death, man, can be emancipated.
Thank you, Martha. Oh, this is a huge topic, right? You could do a series of webinars on the tree of knowledge, the tree of life, their interrelation. But hopefully that gives us a taste. So, any thoughts or questions on anything having to do with the tree of knowledge or the tree of life? Okay. All right, that brings us to the end of verse 5. Having studied HPB's commentary, let's now take a closer look at the verse itself. So, first up, Fohat takes 5 strides. As the intelligence of the builder, that's one of Fohat's qualities. He's described as the intelligence of the builders. Fohat infuses form with spirit and thus becomes the animating principle in each unit of consciousness. The stride is a metaphor for Fohat's descent into the form world. The 5th stride brings Fohat onto the monastic plane, which DK tells us is overseen by one of the elder Fohatic brothers. This is no surprise, since the purpose of this 5th root race is the development first of the intellect and later awareness on the higher mental subplanes, where the soul and the causal body reside. Okay, next, and jump in anytime you have a question about anything I'm describing here. Next, Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel. Winged suggests motion, and specifically rotary motion. In the old commentary, wheels represent one of 2 things. One, the initial phase of manifestation of a unit of consciousness, such as a planet, before it becomes spherical. And 2, time cycles, the former always being subject to the latter. But in her commentary on this verse, HPB tells us that the winged wheels are one of the allegorical names for the 4 Maharajas. Other names include the 4 living creatures, the seraphim, asuras, kinnaras, nagas, and avengers. In his vision, Ezekiel describes the wheel as having the 4 faces of, quote, the living creatures. These faces are associated with a fixed cross, which in turn represents the 4 directions, or emanating energies of the Maharajas. The wheel within a wheel that turns upon itself suggests a dimension higher than those governed by the laws of 3-dimensional time and space. Can we get a reader for these 2 verses from Ezekiel 1?
Yes, but Greg's got a question. He says,
Yeah.
why is that associated with being winged?
Why is what associated with being winged?
Okay, Greg, you're going to be reading this. So unmute yourself and then talk your question, and then you can read, okay?
Okay, in the description of the previous slide, it talks about winged wheel, and why is it associated with being winged? I mean, a wheel is on the ground, but what is a winged wheel?
Yes, well, a wheel is not necessarily on the ground, not in the description, as we see, for instance, shown here. As I said, it just suggests motion, and wheels naturally have a rotary motion, but as we discover in the next slide, they their motion is complex, and we'll read this in a second. So it's the winged, in my estimation, refers to the nature of its motion and the fact of its motion, rather than literally possessing wings. It's a metaphor for motion, in my assessment.
Okay. All right.
All right,
so-
hold it. Robert's got his hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, Robert.
Hi, I think the wing connection with the wheel is what you said earlier. It lifts the wheel off the ground into a higher dimension. It flies as opposed to just being on the ground.
Yeah, but if you think, for instance, a winged wheel could be a primordial planet. These wheels are the first stage of manifestation of planetary, what becomes planetary spheres. So they were never on the ground to start with. They were initially vortexes of energy. In that we're talking about the early formation of the physical world, or the physical universe. And in this earliest stages, they were vortexes of energy infused by Fohat. They started to take on form, and the earliest levels of that form were wheels as opposed to spheres. Part of the Secret Doctrine actually describes this evolution from the wheel to the sphere, right? And of course, they're winged because they're in movement. So
Yeah, all I was saying, I was that not that they were always on the ground, but on a planet, for a planet to become winged or to take flight would be to expand into a higher dimension than if we're not winged.
yeah, and you could look at it as, in terms of evolutional movement in that way as well. It's open to interpretation. The term, but when you're looking at wheels, rather than it being literally wheels with wings like is shown here, I think you have to it suggests the nature of what wings create, which is, as I said, movement. Oh, anyway, so could we go ahead and get a reader for Ezekiel 1 here?
Okay. Yeah, Greg is going to read it for us, but just to add to what you've been saying, we've got a couple of comments here that are very similar. Patty says rising above. And Veronica says maybe to convey that it hovers above or that it flies. And then Patty says elevations. And Janet says, I'm reminded of the solar flares that can be circular, returning to the sun, and would look like a wing within the sun.
Okay, interesting comments. At the level of, well, it really depends on what you're making winged and when in the stage of manifestation this phenomenon appears, right? As to what it's describing. So thank you for your comments. Okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, I guess that was a good question to bring up.
Yeah, I brought a bunch of stuff up. Thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to read. So
Thank you.
Ezekiel 1:15. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his four faces. 16. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl, and they four had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of.
Oh my goodness. Middle of a wheel. Sorry about that. It's a wheel in the middle of a wheel, I think is the finish of that. I don't know what happened there. Let me see. Hang on a sec. Let me get back here. Yeah, hang on. We'll find out. Yeah, there we go. In the It's
Okay.
because I when I emboldened this font, it expanded and lost the last line. So back to play here. Okay, here we go. So in the middle of a wheel, right? Thank you, Greg.
And then the only thing I might just comment, one last thing, is that we think of the world or the embodiment or living a life, incarnating. We are incarnating into the wheel of karma.
Mhm.
We are incarnating into the wheel of the world.
Yeah, it could be another usage of the motion that a wheel is creates.
Or the wheel of life or whatever.
Right.
And
Okay.
Yvonne wants to know, what color is beryl?
Yeah, beryl is a semi-sacred stone that has a kind of shimmering multicolored quality to it, and the actual color depends on the where you mine the beryl from, right? So I think it's that shimmering aspect of the beryl that is being referred to here.
Greg says maybe rainbow-like.
Yeah, rainbow-like in that sense of that the color seems to shift depending on the angle you look at it, right? Okay. So movement in this dimension is further described in the beginning line of stanza 3 in a treatise on cosmic fire. Now this is these are different wheels than the wheels that are the Maharaja, but I think the description of the movement is gives us some insight. Could we get a reader for the short passage, or you read it, HPP? You read it, BL.
The great wheel turned upon itself. The 7 lesser wheels rushed into being. They revolve like their mother, around, within and forward. All that existeth was. The wheels were diverse and in unification, one.
Yeah, so clearly we're in a multidimensional form of movement here. Interestingly, a winged wheel appears on the heel of the allegorical footprint of the Buddha, shown here. Note the whirling swastika-like symbols on 4 of his toes, possibly representing lesser cycles. So we might summarize by saying a winged wheel is a vortex of multi-dimensional energy, a kind of energetic outpost of the 4 Maharajas, used in this context of the winged wheel being a Maharaja, an energetic outpost of the 4 Maharajas who guide the builders of the forms relevant to that cycle in accordance with a karmic law. Okay, any thoughts or questions? Okay, next. Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square. Corners suggest angle, which relates to the previous verse, wherein an army of the sons of light stand at each angle. Interestingly, 2 of the names of the 7th ray Lord are the whirling sphere and the builders of the square. But it is in a treatise on white magic that we find specific reference to the 4 corners of the square. And I think this will help decode this term. Could we get a reader, please?
Robert, can you read that for us, please?
This awareness of purpose can best be expressed in some wonderful words from an ancient writing in the Master's archives. It is said to date back to early Atlantean times. The material on which the writing is found is so old and so frail that all that the masters themselves can touch and see is a precipitation made from it, the original being kept at Shambhala. It runs thus with certain deletions, which it is wiser not to insert. At the 4 corners of the square, the 4 angelic are seen. Orange they are, but veiled in rosy light. Within each form, the yellow flame is seen, and round each form, the blue. 4 words they utter forth, one for each human race, but not the sacred sound which bringeth forth the 7. 2 words have died away, 4 sound today. One sounds in realms so high that man can enter not as man. Thus are there 7 words of man ringing around the square, passing mouth to mouth. Each day of man, the words take form and different scene, and the words will be as follows. From out the north, a word is chanted forth, which means be pure. From out the south, the word peals out, I dedicate, and from out the east, bringing a light divine, the word comes swinging around the square, love all. From out the west, answer is thrown back, I serve.
Thank you, Robert. Any thoughts or questions about this? Almost every. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, hold on a minute. Patty says wings have tended to imply divinity in many human cultures.
Indeed, as we see here in this illustration, right? That's part of what they convey, right? Is divinity. Okay, any other thoughts about this? You can see how deep this question of the 4 corners of the square goes, right? Talking here about each of the root races and the words that are associated with them. It's much, much more is hidden than is revealed, but enough is revealed to show us the depth of the subject. Okay, next up, Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square for the 4 holy ones. The word "for" in "for the 4 holy ones" suggests that the winged wheels are not the 4 Maharajas themselves, but rather instruments or focal points of energy, as we talked about, by which they uphold the laws of karma, the original long arm of the law. DK sums up the activities of the 4 Maharajas in this quote from Initiation, Human and Solar. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, Lynn, can you read that for us? But first, I wanted to say that Greg says this is also easily relatable to the medicine wheel of most of the indigenous peoples on all continents.
Absolutely is. Yeah, that's right. Okay, reader, please.
Besides these main presiding personalities of the council chamber at Shambhala, there is a group of 4 beings who are the representatives upon the planet of the 4 Maharajas, or the 4 lords of karma in the solar system, who are specifically concerned with the evolution at the present time of the human kingdom. These 4 are connected with 1, the distribution of karma, or human destiny. It affects individuals and through the individuals, the groups. 2, the care and tabulation of the Akashic records. They are concerned with the halls of records, or with the keeping of the book, as it is called in the Christian Bible. They are known in the Christian world as the recording angels. 3, the participation in solar councils. They alone have the right during the world cycle to pass beyond the periphery of the planetary scheme and participate in the councils of the solar logos. Thus, they are literally planetary mediators, representing our planetary logos and all that concerns him in the greater scheme of which he is but a part.
Thank you, Lynn. The fact that they alone participate in the councils of the solar logos indicates how exalted, really transcendent these beings are. Okay, this quote from Esoteric Astrology further identifies the 4 Maharajas. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, Yvonne, I'm going to ask you to read this, but first she typed in a chat that says 4 sides.
We can skip that. He already answered that. I was wrong.
Okay.
I'll read this then. No, I think he already answered that. I was thinking the four sides is the four sides of our fourfold personality, human being. But
Well, there's an interesting connection with the four permanent atoms, and we'll be looking at that. It's an idea that Manly P. Hall holds, but let's hold on that. So you were
Okay.
on something there, you just didn't know what. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Mercury and Venus, the sun and the moon, constitute the guardian angels of the four corners of the earth. Note, A, the sun and moon veil hidden planets. B, these are the four Maharajas connected with karma, humanity, cosmos, and man. C, they are the sun or its substitute, Michael. They are the moon or its substitute, Gabriel. They are Mercury or its substitute, Raphael. They are Venus or its substitute, Uriel.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this is from the Secret Doctrine, and it's reprinted in Esoteric Astrology. Secret Doctrine has a lot of blinds in it. Les was, let's see, how can I say this? More was allowed to be revealed at the time of the DK's teachings than was at the time of HPP. So I get the sense of a strong veil in this, right? But nonetheless, we have qualities and identities indicated here, so it, in my mind, it definitely gives us further hints as to the nature of these four Maharajas.
Francis?
Yeah.
Efrosini says, I wonder if what Blavatsky calls karma has a connection with what the Tibetan calls purpose or goal.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know how really to respond to that. I see them as, when a purpose is instituted, then the response to that purpose are going to create karma. But I don't see a direct connection there. Now, if somebody else does, please feel free to speak. Okay, moving on. We're in the last phrase here. Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square for the 4 holy ones and their armies. We need only to finish the quote from Initiation Human and Solar to gain insight into the armies or hosts who work with the Maharajas. Can we get a reader, please?
Okay. Diana says it could be Dharma instead. And that's what Lynn says too. And then Patty says one might pose the following: a purpose or goal may be personal, the infinite inner labor, or selfless on behalf of a group.
Yeah, and that's Dharma. Dharma and purpose are very definitely connected. You could say that Dharma is recognition of a higher purpose, which translates into the plan. You have the purpose of deity, then you have the plan, which is the actually created or wielded or brought into form by the Lapika lords, right? That's they are the formulators of the architecture of the plan, right? The purpose itself is pure energy, which has to be translated, you could say, into the plan. So, and Dharma, you could say, is recognition of your part in that plan. Okay, could we get a reader for this?
Yeah, Greg adds a little bit to that. He said, but isn't Dharma also associated with individual service as well as the work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't see any separation there. Individual service is a bit of an oxymoron in that service is inherently decentralized. That is to say, the spirit of service is group oriented, right? Okay.
And then Robert's got his hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Looking at the image that's in front of us and the quote from Initiation Human Solar, it says, with the right adjustment of karma, which is kind of, I mean, I really never stopped to think about that too much, but the adjustment of karma is a comment sort of blows my mind at the moment, because I think in India, and the Indian teachings, karma just means action. So it would be action from the past, and the adjustment would be to restore the planet Earth or whatever.
Yeah. I like that. It's actually, I think, a deeper insight into karma than, for instance, to dissolve karma. It's because karma will be with us until the day be with us, until the end of the Manvantara, right? And so the right adjustment of karma, I think, is a more accurate understanding of how to progress in this realm, right? Of karmic cause and effect.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, you want to go ahead and read that passage?
Sure. Cooperating with these karmic lords are the large groups of initiates and devas who occupy themselves with the right adjustment of A, world karma, B, racial karma, C, national karma, D, group karma, E, individual karma, and who are responsible to the planetary logos for the correct manipulation of those forces and building agencies, which bring in the right egos on the different rays at the correct times and seasons.
Thank you, Robert. So, again, referencing your point, that's correct manipulation and right adjustment are definitely related, right? And building agents which bring in the right egos on the different rays at the correct times and seasons. All this is part of the karmic unfoldment, of the cycles, right? It's, Okay.
And then Patty says it is of moment to me that in the initial description of the four, that colors were specifically mentioned. My mind instantly went to the divine rays and the colors of each, perhaps indicating which divine rays they are primarily working with.
Yeah, I think that there's no question that the rays play into the quality of emanation of the Maharajas. We talked. We've been on this subject for a while, and we've read through descriptions of these four, and you remember the section where some seem to be malevolent, and some seem to be positive in their influence. Like I think it was the East and the South that were considered positive, and the North and West were malevolent. But then HPB went on to say this is an exoteric understanding, and that in and of themselves they have no good or bad nature, that it's in the way that they are carrying out the law that determines how we see them, right? So I see Samuel has his hand raised. You want to call him Samuel?
Yes, Samuel, go ahead.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, it was just the part about the east and the west and south and north. So when you read our passages, it actually gives you the impression that the north and west are kind of evil place. And I guess esoterically it might actually not mean exactly as we ordinary people think, But then when you look at it in the world today, you definitely see some of these very tension areas seem to be in the West, or at least very far removed from spirituality, seem to be in the West or North. So
This is all according to the perspective of the person being influenced, because the ancient Egyptians saw the West as the land of Amenti, which was the underworld, where then it was determined whether you would go to where was it? I can't quite pull it up. Arulu or Arlu. I can't remember.
Aruba.
Right, anyway, somewhere like that. Or your heart would be thrown to the crocodile and you'd be reincarnated. So, if you're of a ordinary disposition and not enlightened, then it would be a dreaded thing, because your heart's going to be, you're going to go through the process where you're going to have to reincarnate. But if you're ready for liberation, then the West is the direction in ancient Egyptian for the release of your soul from the imprisonment of form. So it really is determined by the perspective of of those that it's influencing. I know in Masonry, maybe Scott would be better able to describe the nature of the North, which is the seat that remains unoccupied. My understanding is that it's the source of deity. What do you say to that, Scott?
It's where the hidden master sits.
Yeah.
And I think that aspect of the North and West is, some of it is it's where the light fails, where it seems to be out of form, dying off. And so if you look at it that way, then they're not what you wish for. You're not necessarily what you're going for. I think the master sits in the North. I think is from related to the seventh ray master, seventh ray Lord, and occupies that connection to Shambhala or some higher council.
Yeah, that first seventh connection. Yeah.
Symbolic of the Syrian connection, I think, from which Blue Lodge came.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think you really are onto something there with the idea of darkness. So if you're form life oriented, you want to be in a lit world. But the source of light is the ultimate light, which is darkness, that light that can't be seen by any eye, right? And so it's a spiritual light. And the West and the North represent that kind of darkness, right? That which leads to spirit, but away from form life. So again, it just has to do with your with the orientation of one considering these directions, really. You could say literally esoteric or exoteric in their meaning, right? Okay, anyone else?
Yes, we've got several comments. Efrosini says, it strikes me that Blavatsky puts such great beings engaging in karma. Karma has the position, I think, of what the Tibetan calls the purpose and registering of the plan. Maybe Blavatsky can't reveal all these esoteric knowledge then and use a more general term, karma for all.
Yeah, well, certainly that's true. That her hand was held at many points where she was not allowed to reveal more. So there is a general quality to the Secret Doctrine in comparison. I know you're saying what, but in comparison to like the works of DK in general, like you could take TCF in particular, that it's much more specific. but even it reads like a table of contents. And any sentence in a treatise on cosmic fire seems like a heading, a subject heading that could be much more further explored, right? So yeah, that's much more is hidden than is revealed. Okay, anyone else?
And then Patty says something, I may have to unmute her, I'm not sure. She says, do we need to ascribe positive or negative to 4 of the 6 directions?
No.
Isn't
It,
she said, isn't that adding to a culturally created thought form?
that's what it is. It's a culturally created thought form, exactly. If you have, if you're outside of personality control, there is no good or bad in these directions at all. They represent certain energies. It's like the first ray is called destructive, right? But it's also the source of deity. So, which are you going to run with? Well, destructive can also mean positive destruction of that which is no longer useful. So it really has to do with perspective.
And all of this discussion reminds me of, number one, it's not just a wheel, it's a spiral. And we're going from the individual to the greater. If you look at that laundry list of karma, it was the individual karma, it was the family karma, it was the group
Right.
karma, it was the planetary karma, it was the world karma, so that's part of the spiraling up the greater sphere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Where did that go?
It's there somewhere. Patty adds, language is
Yeah,
indeed
here it is.
limiting. Yeah. Patty adds, language is indeed limiting. Perhaps the technical language leads the aspirant to perceive thought forms beyond the muddy river of human thought, beyond even the higher mental plane.
Indeed. I'll respond just to the comment about rotational motion for a wheel. And who was it that said that it's actually spiralic?
Me.
Oh, okay. The form world is ruled by rotary motion, but it's the indwelling jiva is responsive to direct motion, which is the motion of pure deity. The combination of the two suggests and defines our evolutional path, which is spiralic, right? So you have form, which is rotary, including the wheels, which are rotary and form based, even if they're noumenal form. And then you have that spark at the center, which drives directly forward, and that's direct motion, which is first ray motion. The combination of the two gives us the motion of this universe, which is spiralic. Okay. Anything else before we move on?
Yes, we have one more
Mhm.
comment from Samuel. He says, for example, Israel is referenced right next to this passage where the author goes on to say it sounds like it's an undeniable prophecy for themselves. Esoterically, since there couldn't be a west or east or any other specified locality as opposed to another in light of the absolute oneness of existence, I still think you are right.
Yeah, well, good. It's perspective. There's what you're describing is a literal perspective of where are you standing on the planet. Israel is in all directions depending on where you are. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that it's a good point in determining the non-fixed nature of the directions. At the level of the Maharajas, they're energetic there's specific forms of energy, right? It's not that, like it's not like, the wicked witch of the West lives in the West kind of a thing, right? So, okay, I'd like to move on here now.
Oh, I have two more comments. You want to feel and Sammy's got his hand up. They don't want you to move on.
I can see that.
Patty says, now if we can just keep humanity from trying to slip the rotating forward moving wheel into reverse.
Well, that's not possible. But, a strange thing about spiralic motion is there's a seeming retrograde as you come back on the rotary part of the spiral. So you seem to go forward rotationally, like towards the east, for instance. And then as you're going up on the spiral, which may not be registered, you seem to be going backwards again towards the west, for instance. But you're actually spiraling up because lessons are learned in the west as well as in the east. All right.
Okay, and then Greg says, but there is also a metaphorical or spiritual perspective of where you are entering into the wheel and at which level spirally.
Yeah, and that determines the whole nature of the wheel itself. Where you enter into it, actually the wheel then transforms into a particular relevance for you, right? Yeah.
And Lynn says in the labors, north is the hierarchical ruler, east the esoteric ruler, south the esoteric ruler, and west the astrological sign.
Okay. Well, thanks for that piece of information. Hierarchical in the north.
And Christine says, are the wheels spinning clockwise or counter? And what difference would it make?
Depends on whether you're looking up at it or looking down at it. Again, it's perspective as to which way it's turning. From a fixed position, which incarnation is, but out of incarnation, it's quality of motion. Now we're told that, disciples on the path move in a counterclockwise motion. And isn't that also the direction that once we correct our motion through the signs, that we move counterclockwise through the signs? Isn't that right, BL? You should know that.
I always get it mixed up because the wheel goes the wrong way and we're moving through the wheel. Okay, the wheel goes counterclockwise.
That's right. Yeah.
And we move through it the wrong way until we get our act together. Right. So clockwise would be the spiritual and counterclockwise would be the wait a minute. I always get it mixed up because it doesn't make logical sense when you.
Well, the way I remember it is that the way the signs naturally progress is eventually the way that we, once we reverse our direction on the wheel, that's how we move through the signs. And as I understand it, that's counterclockwise.
Yes, you're right, because that's the way the signs go. You move. Okay. Aries to Taurus to Gemini spiritually, which is then counterclockwise. And for many, many, many lifetimes, we're just muddling through Aries to Pisces to Aquarius, having to have the be the world savior and the world server when we haven't learned all the tools that we need to be able to do that in the other signs. So, yeah.
But in other traditions, it's just the opposite. For instance, when you circumambulate in a cathedral, I visited Notre Dame in Paris, and I thought, well, I'm going to be a good disciple and move counterclockwise around the church, inside from station to station, right? And I met this group of people led by a priest coming the opposite direction who looked at me very quizzically, right? And I realized, oh, that's right. You're supposed to go clockwise in a church, that's considered the sacred direction. Same in Buddhism. Buddhists circumambulate their stupas clockwise. So, it's going to be, oops, what did I just do? Boy, I have to get out of here and go back. See, I was getting itchy to get on.
So it's all perspective.
Yeah, so it's perspective. Yeah. And of course there's information not available to us in this as well, right? About what's the fundamental movement? It's going to be a quality of energy, not a directionality. Because like I said before, if you're above the wheel, it's going to be moving the opposite direction than if you're below the wheel, that's in a movement. So it shows that in itself, that's perspective. Okay, any other thoughts about this?
Yeah, just a couple of short ones. Greg says also going up on the spiral is a kind of ascension quality.
Correct.
And Patty says leaving the other two directions to involution and evolution. Oh, that was a question.
Yeah, involution is in this solar system, all motion is spiralic. And so the involutional is a downward into form in a spiralic way, and then a return to spirit in a spiralic way. But from another point of view, it's all forward motion, because the path into form is part of the purpose, is part of becoming. It's part of the experience that's needed to be gained, right, in order to progress as a disciple, eventually progress as a disciple, right? It's just like, the idea of that quality of individualization that happens in Leo, which leads to the integrated personality. It's very separative, but it's on the axis of the group consciousness of Aquarius. They participate in the same energy. It just, they're two opposite poles of the same energy.
Okay. And DK talks in esoteric astrology about the wheels turning in upon themselves, which I understand to be, before you've completely integrated that soul and personality, it's the personality going clockwise and the soul trying to go counterclockwise, and the two turning in on this self until they get their act together and start working in harmony.
I like that description. I would reverse the description and say, that the soul is moving in the right direction, and that the personality is moving against the grain. That creates, the trauma of conflict until alignment is made, and then there's a return to harmony. But yeah, I'd like to know where that description is of the inner movement, right?
Yeah, it's more a description of the wheel turning in upon itself.
Yeah, that's what.
I'll look for it and send it to you. Okay, and then a couple more comments here. Greg says it's like working with the labyrinth. You enter counterclockwise and you return clockwise to leave the labyrinth.
Yeah, and also during your time in the labyrinth, you're constantly reversing directions. You go clockwise, then you go counterclockwise, then you go clockwise, because you weave your way through these. But in general, it's, as you said, you have this overall movement. I did an analysis of the motion in the chart labyrinth, and it's quite fascinating. I gotta let my cat out. Hang on. There you go. Okay.
And then Greg says, oops, maybe it's backwards, entering the labyrinth clockwise and leave counterclockwise. But as you pointed out, it's actually a switchback kind of a thing.
You move from the left lobe to the right lobe eventually, but you pass from one to the other sequentially, and then finally you move completely over to the right lobe to finish, right? So anyway, that's another subject.
And Patty says to become more whole, to become more a part of the whole with no separativeness.
What's the reference there?
I think it was her previous comments on the two directions of involution and evolution.
Yeah, that's right. Which is why you can, in a way, see the entire cycle as evolutional, right? I mean, if you look like at the destiny, or let's see, the unfoldment of a scheme, right? You could see that from the beginning of the Manvantara through the entire unfoldment of the scheme is evolutionary, and yet it's filled with evolutional sub periods, right? Sub cycles. Okay.
And then let me see here. Oh, comments just keep coming. Yvonne says direction of dance and skating is counterclockwise. And Veronica says something you said about the lobes. Don't we eventually use both?
The lobes.
You were talking about you go from the right lobe to the left lobe eventually.
Left to right as you're facing the entrance. Yeah, there's I think that has to do with the form aspect and the spirit aspect, that the right side of the labyrinth as you're facing the entrance of the labyrinth is, generally speaking, suggests that introspective part of yourself. Like in your early passes into it, you're just experiencing for the first time connection with the unseen realms. But then eventually, when you walk up that final path to the center, that is soul infusion, soul connection. That's just one way of interpreting it, right? So yes, both lobes are needed. They make the total picture, right? Soul infused incarnation, right?
Okay, Samuel's got his hand up.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other book that we study, what's his name? The author, Manly P. Hall. Yeah, I think he did write something on this too. I wonder it's the same thing where he talks about the different personalities which they for which we incarnate from Aries to Pisces, which kind of help us develop more from one to another until eventually we get to Pisces, where and he kind of made a comment on there that by that time you already have a lot of unsolved karma, and so oftentimes you have a lot of stuff to do, but then he kind of symbolizes it with where the person's going to the cemetery. That is the end of the road. But basically, what he's saying is that you only going, but to begin again on the wheel. I don't know at what point it so enters, but eventually you got to begin and go over it again. I hope you get the point I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's a huge topic. Cycles and wheels are a major part of the astrological discussion, right? And it's one of the main symbols.
Right.
But at this point, I'd like to move on.
Move on.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions on anything having to do with, specifically with this very short verse, right? Which has to do with Fohat setting up these four winged wheels, which are the directions. Anybody?
Not that. We had a couple more comments that follow that followed the other, but their general consensus is okay. You want to move forward, please.
Okay. Now, I do welcome all comments. I would just suggest that, and in service of moving on through the Secret Doctrine, which at this point, is only going to take us 200 years, that, you keep your comments relevant to the material at hand. That's all, Okay. Before we move on to verse 6, let's take a look at what Manly P. Hall has to say about the 5th verse of this stanza. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Verse 5. Fohat takes 5 strides and builds a winged wheel at each corner of the square for the 4 holy ones and their armies. The process of descending into the denser substance continues. Fohat builds the 4 great thrones or centers for the Maharajas of the 4 angles. They are the lords and kings of the Dhyan Chohans and rulers of the 4 cardinal angles of cosmos. They are the beasts of the revelation who bow before the throne of the infinite. The Rosicrucians called them the lords of form. They are the lion, the bull, the man, and the eagle. They are the 4 great body centers in man. There are also the winged wheels filled with eyes referred to in Ezekiel.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, the 4 cardinal angles refer to east, west, north, and south, not to the cardinal cross. I say this because the 4 beasts, which the Rosicrucians call the lords of form, and which are associated with the cardinal angles, are the animals associated with the fixed cross, not the cardinal cross. MPH then goes on to say that, quote, these are the 4 great body centers in man. By body centers, he means permanent atoms, which he calls elsewhere in his writing seed atoms. The interesting point here is that he associates them with the 4 beasts, the Rosicrucian lords of form. Could we get a reader for this excerpt from an issue of MPH's manuscript series, and it's from the same period as the issue on the Secret Doctrine. And if you'd start with the caption, please.
Carrie, can you read that, please?
The 4 beasts and the Ancient of Days depicted in the Selos Apocalypse. The chronicles of life of every individual are recorded and preserved in what are called the seed atoms, permanent atoms. These seed atoms are twisting, spinning, whirling vortices of force, around which the 4 bodies of man are built as he comes into physical incarnation. These 4 are called the mysteries, the guardian angels, or the 4 laws of the records. They were symbolized by the early Jews as the cherubim. They are the 4 beasts of Ezekiel, called the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle.
Thank you, Carrie. Note the figure on the right, which with its cycle icons and spine-like appendage seems to illustrate MPH's idea. It's interesting to consider the permanent atoms as representing the fixed cross. It makes sense because it's the cross that we are all crucified on when we incarnate. And of course, the permanent atoms are the means by which we take on the bodies of our incarnation.
Francis?
Yeah.
Anne Veronica says, so the fourth body center is the monastic permanent atom. Do we have which one correspond to each atom?
Well, let's see. What would it be? I mean, we have the physical and astral. I'm not sure what the fourth would be. Anybody have any ideas about that? Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, I was brooding on that too. Maybe they're talking, maybe it refers to obviously the physical, astral, mental unit and monastic permanent.
There it is. There you go. Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah, the mental unit, which is on the fourth subplane of the mental, whereas the monastic permanent atom would be on the first subplane. Now this isn't definitive. This is just sort of the most obvious conclusion. Given the idea. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Anne Veronica says the bull represents the astral.
Yeah, it gets interesting to consider which animals represent which.
The lion, the mental unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Often, especially in ancient times, the lion was the god or goddess would be seen surmounting a lion, and in the eighth arcanum of the Tarot, you see the Virgo-like maiden effortlessly opening the mouth of the lion, which also suggests a mental polarity and a conquering of this aspect, or I should say a mastery of this aspect, right? Yeah, so you have lion, you have the bull, and then you have the man. What would that represent?
Anne Veronica says the eagle, spirit, soul. She hasn't got to the man yet, but if we look at him as the Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio, she says man, the physical.
Yeah, well, man is associated with Aquarius, generally, and the physical with, and Leo with the lion. So, yeah, it's, and then the bull with Taurus, the desire aspect, and the eagle with Scorpio, of course. But Scorpio is a triple sign, and the eagle, which is esoterically the phoenix, which is in Egypt the Bennu bird, is the esoteric symbol. That's the symbol of the one who has passed the tests of Scorpio. So I think you're right in seeing that as the highest correspondent there, right?
Trudy's got her hand up, and then we've got a couple of more comments. Go ahead, Trudy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say man must be represent the physical.
Hang on. Turn your volume down, please.
Sorry, am I too loud?
Yeah, you just came blasting through, but
sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Also, in this picture, which is showing this, it shows the sperm. This picture with the oval, or with the tail, it is a sperm.
Yeah, I see your point. With Christ as like the essence of life. The jiva
right
at the center. Yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? That way.
Mm.
And then you have, well, I don't want to get in too much of an analysis here. I'm not really
and then they got
prepared. prepared to, but some of these creatures are winged, the upper two are winged, some aren't.
The lion has four heads.
4 heads. So gosh, and I'm not prepared to offer an interpretation of this. But there's something deeply esoteric. I mean, look at this bull with this head, between the horns, and also this seeming almost like a unicorn like quality. And this, I just don't know what to do with this. I didn't spend the time to try to interpret this picture. But you can see how it definitely could represent this what MPH called the seed atoms or the permanent atoms, right? And the idea of the incarnating, the movement from the physical up to the Christos, the soul aspect,
Patty says the atmic, monadic, and buddhic together represent the spiritual permanent atom, or the triad, manifests within man.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, and that could be, this idea of the Christ and the Vesica-Pisces, right? Which, the Vesica-Pisces is made from spirit and matter, right? This is that place between the two, and it's also a womb and also a birth channel. There's really a lot here in this, not to mention these guys, whoever they are, surrounding the Christ, the cherubim, seraphim, the angelic hosts, I guess, right?
I think they're waiting to be born.
Could be.
And Patty also points out the scorpion to the eagle to the dove. That's the progress of that. And Greg says, if you look more specifically at the picture, you see there are actually 6 symbols. He says the man, the eagle, the snake. So he's thinking of the sperm there as a snake. But then I don't see the rest of his, I guess that got cut off. Diana says it could be the monadic symbol in the heart of the Vesica-Pisces.
Yeah, I think it's very much a heart symbol here, over the entrance to a number of cathedrals, you have the Christ in this Vesica-Pisces. That is to say, 12th century, like a chart, you have this symbol of Christ emerging from the Vesica-Pisces, over the door of the entrance. Okay. Anything else about this? This is actually really good timing. Hang on a second. Okay, so this whole concept we've been talking about is illustrated by the relationship between the 12th and the 21st arcana of the Tarot, whose numbers are reversals of each other. Notice 1, 2, and 2, 1. The hangman is the arcana of the crucified monad in incarnation, whereas the world arcana represents the realm of the fixed cross, the realm in which the hangman incarnates, right? HPV tells us that the world is the objective symbol of the one divided into the many on the planes of illusion, right? So you can see the interconnection here. There's some other interesting connections between these two. For example, the value of mem, the Hebrew letter associated with the hangman, is 40. Mem means water and is considered to be the mother seed by the ancient Kabbalists. And of course, water is also a symbol for the material planes. The value of the letter tav associated with the world arcanum is 400. As we know, 4 is the number of form, governed by the 4 Maharajas or form lords through the agency of the fixed cross, and according to MPH, the agency of the 4 permanent atoms. So there's some interesting correlations. Okay. Thoughts or questions on anything having to do with NPH's interpretation or with verse 5? Dot, 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 because that's where we're going to stop, because next is verse 6. And we move into, it's a really extensive final verse of stanza 5. So thank you all. I just love hosting this. It's terrific. And very animated discussion. Appreciate that. Even though sometimes I get anxious and want to move forward, it all works out exactly like it's supposed to, and I really do enjoy our discussions. BL, would you give dates for the next two? I think we're right on for first and third Sundays, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We're on schedule right now. The next one of these, the next Secret Doctrine, is December 19th at 8 p.m. And you will use this same link from when you registered for this series. The next Secret Teaching of All Ages is coming up in just a couple weeks. It's on the 5th of December at 8 p.m. GMT. And again, you'll use the link that you used to register for the Secret Teaching of All Ages series, okay? Beginning in January, we're going to be switching to, we won't be using the webinar, the Zoom webinar platform. We'll be using the Zoom meeting platform. You will be going into a waiting room until we're ready to start. And
yeah, so you won't be immediately admitted to the webinar. You know,
right.
when you hear those who come early hear BL and I talk about the weather and stuff, you know, that'll be finished.
Right. And you should have some kind of a notice that tells you you're in the right place. You know, welcome to Francis's secret webinars. We'll be with you. You know, the webinar will start and we'll be with you. What we're going to do starting in January is you will not need to register for the series. We'll have just the one link fits all. That you just connect to. So you won't be getting reminders anymore, not from Zoom. You will continue to get reminders from us through Constant Contact. So lots of changes going on, but the takeaway is December will be business as usual. All these new changes start in January.
Right.
Okay.
And even then, you're still going to get an invitation in your email that you'll be able to click on and join. So it'll have a little different formats, but you know, nothing to worry much about. Okay, y'all, thanks so very much, and we'll see you on December 5th for Secret Teachings. Okay, bye-bye.
Right. And for those of you here in the States, have a happy Thanksgiving. Goodbye, everybody.